SpongeBob SquarePants, I believe it's called, and we're starting here at £180,000.
A stainless steel rabbit sold for $91 million.
An artist has duct taped a banana to a wall and is now selling it for six figures.
Art. It can be a chance to see the world from a new perspective. A raw, emotional encounter. A chance to say, my kid could make that. But for many people, art is also a business. A big business. In 2019, global art and antique sales came to more than $64 billion. That's around 1.5 times the film industry's entire box office haul, and more than 3 times the recorded music industry's total revenue in the same year. To be clear, I don't know if that live, laugh, love sign your mum bought at Target counts towards that huge amount. I would argue that it definitely should not. The online art market has been growing for years and is expected to grow even more this year for pandemic-related reasons, as auction houses are embracing online sales and auction bidders are embracing the freedom of throwing their money at art without wearing pants. But before you try to get in on the gold rush, you should know your chances of earning a fortune from making, selling, or collecting art are about as good as your chances of nailing that amateur restoration. Most people probably have some kind of art hanging up at home. Technically, anyone can start a collection because, with the exception of live, laugh, love signs, art is in the eye of the beholder.
I currently have just over 1,500 unique pizza boxes. Independent pizzerias, chain pizzerias, stock boxes, custom boxes.
Most people are unlikely to find themselves at a gallery shelling out big bucks for a masterpiece, unless of course they broke it.
This is the moment that could cost a Kansas family more than $100 grand.
The art world's massive value isn't just a result of klutzes breaking things. It's mainly inflated by famous names, massive auctions, and ultra-wealthy collectors. Like in 2017, when Christie's auctioned off Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi, fetching a world record price.
$400 million is the bid, and the piece is sold.
With fees, the transaction came to a whopping $450 million. The identity of the buyer was at first a mystery, until the New York Times claimed it was a Saudi prince, which would make sense seeing as the painting depicts Christ holding an orb, and as we know, Saudi royals love a good orb. But then American officials said the true buyer was actually Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, a claim the Saudi embassy denied, just one of the things the embassy has denied bin Salman being behind. I'm talking about murder. It's not just long-deceased artists who can make millions off their art. Alive people can do it too. Just ask Jasper Johns, who sold a version of his flag painting for $110 million in 2010, the most expensive privately sold work by a living artist. But there's a reason for the starving artist stereotype. In 2017, more than 80% of independent artists in the UK earned less than £10,000 a year from their work, and more than half earned less than £5,000. Artists are often asked to work for free, or in exchange for a murky, dubious commodity known as exposure, a currency which landlords have stubbornly refused to accept. These days, the international art market is dominated by 3 countries: the US, the UK, and China. Together, they make up more than 80% of the industry's value. And driven by big-ticket auctions, sales are dominated by 2 major auction houses, Christie's and Sotheby's. The sort of Marvel and DC of the art buying world if Christie's sold variations on the same piece of art over and over, but packaged it as a cinematic universe. Unless you're a Renaissance master, the value of your work isn't necessarily bound to its quality or even its rarity. Demand is driven by a range of vague factors, including industry speculation, media attention, the opinions of tastemakers, or me standing in a gallery loudly saying I don't get it. There are certainly some high-dollar art buyers and collectors who are in it for the love of the game. They might display what they buy at home or loan it to public museums. But art is often just a particularly beautiful way for rich people to make even more money from the money they already have.
Art has competed with and even beaten stock market returns.
One of the ways in which people of wealth get wealthier is because they can buy blue chip.
Masterworks says it's the first company to allow investors to buy shares of masterpieces. It's like a co-op, but for something you'd get yelled at for touching. For an initial investment of $1,000, you can brag to your friends that you own a teeny tiny part of a piece of work by artists like Banksy or Warhol, so-called blue chip artists whose work has generally gone up in value. But waiting for your art to appreciate in value could take time. For a quicker return on investment, there are ways of buying art to evade taxes or government authorities. Perhaps most notably, the use of free ports in places like Geneva and Singapore, where assets can remain officially in transit between countries indefinitely.
There is a lot of behavior that is shady at best. Some people use art, especially expensive art, as a form of money laundering.
In 2007, a Brazilian banker smuggled Basquiat's Hannibal, then worth about $8 million, into New York's JFK International Airport in a crate whose contents were declared to be worth only $100. Even museums and prestigious art institutions have been known to purchase art and artifacts of questionable provenance. Christie's recently auctioned off 2 statues made by the Igbo people of Nigeria, in a sale the auction house said was perfectly lawful, but art historians insist that the figures were stolen during the country's civil war. Then there's a wider debate about cultural artifacts that ended up in the world's major museums by virtue of being stolen, during war or just as a bonus of imperialism, and whether they should be returned to their countries of origin. One of the arguments museums use to resist returning these pieces is that more people will see them if they're the ones displaying it. A line of reasoning that sounds a whole lot like saying that museums are providing countries' artists with exposure. In the EU, regulators are attempting to address art market opacity with the 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, which would require dealers, galleries, and transporters to record and report information about their clientele and the origins of the money and art they trade. Critics of art world oversight argue the price of compliance would be too high a barrier of entry for new galleries and dealers, and transparency, they say, would be a turn-off to the very, very rich people who keep art money flowing. One possible way of keeping the regulators off your back would be just not buying masterpieces worth as much as most people make in a lifetime and stashing them in shadowy, tax-dodging warehouses where no one can ever see them. Just an idea. Instead, you could support up-and-coming artists or lesser-known talents, many of whom you can find right here on the internet. For just $500, you could own this painting of Dr. Phil as an ant throwing a jar of pee. Or you could spruce up your living room with a print of this wholesome family portrait. You don't even have to limit yourself to art that already exists. There are plenty of artists out there willing to work with your budget to help make magic happen. Just as long as it's not another live, laugh, love sign.